Good morning. Here is your global news report for April 15, 2026. The global situation in mid-April 2026 is marked by geopolitical tensions between the United States and Iran, with the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz significantly impacting global energy markets and economies. The Russia-Ukraine conflict continues with intensified use of unmanned weapons and student conscription campaigns, while Russia's economy also fluctuates due to external factors. Concurrently, former U.S. President Donald Trump maintains his influence in international politics through his hardline stance on Iran policy, criticism of Italian Prime Minister Meloni and the Pope, and controversial social media posts. The United States and Iran have expressed intentions to continue ceasefire talks mediated by Pakistan, but disagreements persist over the duration of uranium enrichment suspension. Israel has initiated direct negotiations with Lebanon, demanding Hezbollah's disarmament. Ukraine announced the first capture of Russian positions using only drones and unmanned ground vehicles. In Russia, drone attacks on the Lipetsk region were reported, leading the government to introduce export restrictions on helium until the end of 2027, citing international shortages due to the Iran war. Meanwhile, Russia's oil export revenue surged in March due to temporary U.S. sanctions waivers. Russia is also strengthening its campaign to recruit students into drone units, and Foreign Minister Lavrov emphasized resistance to containment. Former U.S. President Donald Trump continues to draw international attention through his dealings with Iran and his interactions with leaders of other nations. He emphasized a hardline approach towards Iran, expressing willingness to continue negotiations, while publicly criticizing Italian Prime Minister Meloni's stance on the Iran war and Pope Leo XIV, stating he was shocked and that she is not the same person as before. It was also reported that he deleted an AI-generated image of himself as Jesus Christ from social media after facing criticism. He supported Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán, but his defeat has cast doubt on his diplomatic influence. Next, here are the key stories from the U.S. In the United States, Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell and others announced their resignations due to scandals. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette was acquired and saved from closure, and severe weather continues in the Midwest, with numerous regions experiencing tornadoes, heavy rain, and hail, affecting millions. Democratic Representatives Eric Swalwell and Tony Gonzalez announced their resignations from Congress following scandals including allegations of sexual misconduct. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, with a 240-year history, will continue publication after being acquired by the publisher of the Baltimore Banner just weeks before its planned closure. In the U.S. Midwest, multiple tornadoes destroyed buildings in Kansas, floods occurred in Wisconsin, and baseball-sized hail fell, with millions in Chicago, Milwaukee, and surrounding areas potentially affected by the severe weather. Next, here are the key stories from Europe. Europe is seeing significant developments including a stark national security warning from the UK, increased compensation for victims of the long-standing contaminated blood scandal, and election results in Hungary suggesting a shift in government. In the UK, former NATO Secretary-General Lord George Robertson warned that Britain's national security is in peril, criticizing the Starmer government's corrosive complacency towards defence and delays in its decade-long defence investment plan. The UK government announced an increase in compensation for victims of the contaminated blood scandal, with an additional £35,000 per person for former students experimented on in schools, allocating a total of £1 billion. In Hungary's elections, Peter Magyar's Tisza party is projected to secure a supermajority amid record voter turnout, dealing a significant blow to the 16-year-old government of Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. Next, here are the key stories from the Middle East. In the Middle East, although envoys from Israel and Lebanon met in the U.S., Israel declared its intention to continue fighting Hezbollah. The U.S. maintained its hardline stance against Iran and blockaded the Strait of Hormuz. Attacks by pro-Iranian forces continued in the Gulf region, escalating tensions across the area. Envoys from Israel and Lebanon met in Washington, D.C., but Israel stated it would continue its war against the Iranian-backed Hezbollah and rejected ceasefire talks, demanding Hezbollah's disarmament in Lebanon. Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem viewed the U.S.-hosted talks between Lebanon and Israel as a ploy to pressure Hezbollah into disarmament and urged the Lebanese government not to participate. The U.S. maintained its hardline stance against Iran, continuing the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. President Donald Trump claimed Iran wants a deal, while Iran denounced the U.S. actions as piracy. Next, here are the key stories from Russia. Russia experienced fatalities from drone attacks originating from Ukraine, while oil export revenues saw a sharp increase. Multiple developments occurred, including issues with tankers in the Baltic Sea, a guilty verdict for a former lawmaker, and restrictions on helium exports. A Ukrainian drone attack in Lipetsk region resulted in one fatality and several injuries. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced the interception of 97 Ukrainian drones across 7 regions. Russia's oil export revenues surged to $19 billion in March, nearly doubling from $9.75 billion the previous month, with total oil and petroleum product exports increasing to 7.1 million barrels per day. Former Senator Dmitry Savelyev was sentenced to 10 years in a maximum security prison for conspiring to murder a business partner, reportedly over a dispute concerning the transfer of shares in their joint company. Next, here are the key stories from China. President Xi Jinping discussed strengthening cooperation with the Spanish Prime Minister, and the International Consumer Goods Expo commenced. In Hong Kong, tourism issues and rehabilitation programs for the 2019 protests were focal points. Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez on April 14, 2026, urging strengthened cooperation in areas such as trade, new energy, smart economy, and cultural exchange. The 6th China International Consumer Products Expo opened on April 13, 2026, in Hainan Province, featuring over 3,400 brands from more than 60 countries and regions, attracting attention to China's vast market. In Hong Kong, cheap tours from the mainland are blamed for coerced shopping by tourists, prompting calls for enhanced surprise inspections during the May Day Golden Week. Additionally, a special rehabilitation program is expected to be introduced for thousands arrested during the 2019 protests but not prosecuted. Next, here are the key stories from Japan. Japan's supply chains are being impacted by the escalating tensions in the Middle East, prompting the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry to consider designating critical materials. Domestically, the National Tax Agency is reviewing the inheritance valuation of unlisted shares, while major companies are advancing with AI-driven autonomous driving and management integration. The Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry has decided to consider designating chemical products derived from oil and natural gas as specified critical materials as early as fiscal year 2026, to support stable supply amidst supply concerns due to Middle East tensions. The National Tax Agency announced its intention to revise the inheritance valuation method for unlisted shares to curb excessive tax avoidance, with adjustments expected in the fiscal year 2027 tax reform, potentially increasing inheritance tax burdens for some. Lixil has set the delivery date for unit baths as undecided, and a Panasonic-affiliated company is facing a similar situation, attributed to difficulties in procuring naphtha derived from crude oil due to escalating Middle East tensions. Next, here are the key stories from Asia-Oceania. In the Asia-Oceania region, the Middle East conflict impacted Australia's flight schedules and Singapore's security alert levels. In India, opposition criticism of the government and progress in cataloguing cultural assets were notable economic, political, and social developments. The British royal family's visit to Australia also garnered attention. Qantas Airways announced significant cuts to domestic flights, citing rising fuel costs and the impact of the Middle East conflict. In India, while Prime Minister Modi celebrated Tamil New Year, the opposition Congress Party sharply criticized the complete mockery of democracy for not sharing the constitutional amendment bill in parliament, indicating active political movements. The Singaporean government stated that its security forces need to maintain a high alert level due to security risks, including the threat of terrorism, stemming from the escalation of the Middle East conflict. Next, here are the key stories from South America. In South America, the trial for a high-profile disappearance case began in Bolivia, progress was made on infrastructure issues in Ecuador, and a regional meeting on fentanyl countermeasures was held, indicating activity in domestic judicial and infrastructure sectors, as well as international drug control efforts. The trial for the disappearance of Odalis Vaquiata began in Bolivia after 4 years of investigation, with 5 individuals, including her ex-partner, indicted. Ecuador officially received the Coca-Codo Sinclair hydroelectric power plant, constructed by Chinese firm Sinohydro, which has over 17,000 cracks, and will receive $400 million in compensation. A South American corn region meeting hosted by the DEA was held in Montevideo, Uruguay, with 8 countries including Argentina, Brazil, and Bolivia participating, focusing on the issue of fentanyl consumption. That concludes today's Global News Report. Have a great day. Thank you for watching.